Really hard to do this without messing up the camera. Go down a little bit more. This video is a little bit different to what I normally do. I recently sent out a post on Facebook asking people for requests for content, if I could help with any tips or tricks with regarding their own productions. One of the people who got back to me was asking about drums and toms in particular. I messaged them and said, have you got any sessions that I can look at and possibly break down for you? They sent over a session in Logic, and I decided to do a series called Mixing Drums Using Only Stock Plugins in Logic 10. Logic Pro X, or whatever you want to call it. Spent a lot of time thinking of that title, honest Gav. I don't want to spend too much time on this, it's just the intro. I know I look amazing in these lights. Hey. But without further ado, let's just jump in and see what happens. What I'm going to do is, this is literally how I would set the sessions, so I just want to have a quick look at everything before we dive in. So the first thing to notice when we're looking at this is what I really like about the session and what I really like about Logic is the use of folder tracks. So I've got track for drums, which is, when we click on the down arrow, actually opens it up and expands it, and also I've got for guitar as well. So we look at that, we've got a bunch of bits and pieces in there as well. So what I'm just going to do, just to begin with, is I'm just going to solo the drums on their own first. So this is literally, it's like the first time I've really heard the sessions. I'll just press X now, so just going to bring the guitars in now as well. Okay, so what we've got, the drums to begin with, they actually sound pretty good. We do have 2 effects ends, and there's quite a few instances of FabFilter Q6. I'm just going to get rid of them first of all. And the other thing that I'm probably going to do as well is I've got a limiter on the toms and I've got a compressor as well. All I'm going to do with the rest of the plugins on this is I'm just going to get rid of them. So I just click and drag and select, and then choose no plugin, and do the same here as well. So the other thing I've noticed as well, we've got gates on the toms. So this is now, I'm going to mute the effects ends here. I'm actually going to colour them as well. I'll see. I'm going to send them as a purple. And let's go red, orangey. Cool. Right. Other thing I'm going to do is kick. I just colour code it. Purple for kick. What I quite like about this, just looking at the session to begin with, is it's been pretty well laid out. All the tracks for the drums have been labelled. So I got kick in, kick out. I got sub kick, snare top and bottom, rack floor, overheads, and then room mics. Just quickly listen to the snares. Listening to this now, there's a bit of bleed on the kick. You're getting a bit of the drums. I'm not really too worried about that at the moment. That sounds fine to me. I mean, it's been recorded really, really well. Let's see if we got any track notes. No notes, okay. So the first thing that I've actually done on this session is across all the audio tracks themselves, I've inserted a gain plugin onto the session. And the reason I've actually done this isn't because I actually want to change the volume or the gain for any of the plugins themselves. I've just done it so that if I want to quickly check the phase relationships between the individual tracks, I can do that quite quickly just by turning the plugin on and off. So if I just went through them now, it's just literally, you can see that they're on. They're not actually, they're currently bypassed, that's why the colour's off. So, or if I want to look at the drums now, I could just literally choose a section, press cycle C. So then if what I'm going to look at doing now is I'm going to cycle through the phase relationship on and off between the individual tracks. And if the sound gets bigger, it will mean that the channel needed inverting. If it doesn't, it just means they're actually in the right order. So kick all seems fine, always good. And snare, so look at the snare. Cool. Next thing I'm going to look at now is the toms, and this is one of the things that I was actually asked to look at in particular. When I opened up the session originally, first thing that I noticed was there was a gate plugin on the tracks. I tend not to use the gates too much in Pro Tools or Logic. What I'll tend to do is actually use strip silence. I find strip silence in Pro Tools a little bit easier just because you can actually see it visually on the session. With Logic, you have to select the track in particular, press Control and X, and you come up with this view. And what this lets you then do is you change the threshold. And all we need to do is I just need to see, I'm looking at, this is probably going to be toms, and just trying to make sure that I only select only the files that actually need to be chosen. Let's bring that threshold up a bit more. So that's the first one. I'm actually picking up the one before. I don't think that is one. This can probably go a little bit higher. I think that's pretty good. So I'm going to put and you've also, all I've done is change the threshold so far, and the maximum time or the minimum time that you accept as a silence. So I've increased that a little bit. The next thing I'm going to do is add a bit of pre-attack. So what this does is actually just brings the front out a little bit, and the post-release I'm going to do the same as well. It's just so that I get you with the toms, you'll normally get a bit of decay. So it's almost like you're doing a manual gate. So I press OK. So let's have a look again. Control Z and Shift Command Z. Oh, sorry, Command Z. Next thing I'm going to change, I'm going to change the Command tool from the marquee tool to fade. So what I can then do is if I hold down Command and then click and drag, that'll actually create fades for me as well. I'm just going to check that the strip clips are actual tom hits rather than like say like it's like a rogue snare or something, which sometimes happens with toms. So just play through. So that's a snare, that one can go. And literally just cycle through it then. So I've got another one here. I'm going to fade in. I know that's a snare. And the other thing there is when I'm actually looking at the audio clips, you can kind of almost tell with the clips themselves. You can see that it's a rack tom because the sustain of the track is much thicker than the other ones where you've got, it's just like a very short peak and then it just closes back down again, which means that the actual body of the tom isn't ringing. So if we listen to this now, we'll hear, I think there's going to be 2 hits on the rack tom, and then a bit of bleed, and then comes the snare. So what I can tell from that is I don't need these tracks, I'll just delete them. Hold down Command, which brings up the the fade tool, and does a little fade, so I know that one then is correct. Probably fade that in, fade that out, fade in, fade out. And then I'll do the same scissors, going into Final Cut mode there. Fade in. The other thing is while I'm doing this, I tend to manually fade in and out on Logic just because I can kind of test, you can kind of check it and just check that you're getting the right hits on the transients, so you're not actually cross-fading over too much. If you want to actually, say I wanted to batch the fades on this, what I could do is I could select a couple of tracks, and on here we've got regions, and if we go on for more, we've got a fade in value and fade out value. And what that'll let you do is actually say how many. You can see that it actually moves, like the selected tracks will actually fade in, fade out. So you could actually batch all the fades automatically as well. So just, I can see here that again that you've got fat ones. So just quickly go through the rest of it now. And the reason I'm fading in and fading out of all the tracks is just to get into good habits for the sessions. And what I mean by that is just the fade-ins, what that'll allow you to do is stop you from getting clicks and pops in the session later on. So it's just a good habit to get into. I do this in Pro Tools quite a lot as well. With Pro Tools I normally use A&S, which is the fade tool. So that, I think that's all the toms. That's all the rack tom. So let's go on to the floor tom. Control X again. The floor tom for this track doesn't appear to be affected as much by the snare. So it's actually a lot easier to visually see the track and see where the floor tom hits are. So it should actually be a bit quicker to do this. Just remember the settings from the previous track. So with the rack tom I set it up with minus 13 decibels. I got the pre-fade, the pre-attack and the post-release, the attack time and release times for the tracks. So I can press OK. And that's actually, I think that's pretty much got everything. So I can just press Command Z to double check. So I want 1 there, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yep, that's just got everything. So what I could actually do for this then is I just zoom in on the first track. I could look at then go, I got 23 regions selected. I could fade up on here, do like 50 milliseconds in, probably go a bit further. And fade out as well. So then if I cycle through, that should have actually done all the fade in, fade outs for me. So there we go, yeah. Fade outs have all been done. So let's just have a listen to those two now. Okay. The next thing, when it comes to mixing drums or mixing toms, when I'm recording drums, what I'll tend to do is I'll probably get a drummer to play like a 4/4 beat just to go over the whole kit, and then I might ask them to do like a drum roll, go from rack to floor, rack to middle to floor, or just play between the toms. When it comes to mixing, what I might do just to begin with is just to get a good bass. They've got this section in the song. There's two sections of the song where we've got a loop. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to zoom in on here. This kick sounding great. I haven't actually done anything to it. It's just a good drum kit. So let's have a look at what I'm going to do now on the rack and the floor. I'm going to insert, let's have a look, EQ. And we're going to go vintage, and we're going to go console EQ. So the vintage console EQ is like a Neve 1073, Neve 1084. I'm choosing this because I really like Neve mic pre's and Neve EQs on drums. When we're in Rockfield, they've got the Neve desk in the coach house, and they've also got 1066 modules. For the toms, what I tend to do is basically I'll go big, I'll go home. What I mean by that is I'll go quite extreme on the actual EQs and stuff. So what I'll probably start off is we just go on to the console EQ for the rack tom, and I'm just going to solo the rack tom, because so I have a setting that I like, and what I'll tend to do when I'll do this when I'm recording as well. If I've got an EQ setting, I'll tend to like turn it on and off and just check that what I've done's made an improvement on the original sound. And the other thing that I'm actually doing is I'm using the output and I'm driving it quite a bit to get a bit of distortion onto it as well from the track. What I tend to do with that is it's a habit from recording. It's a headroom thing. Is like I'll drive it, I get the nice oversaturation, but I don't want to clip Pro Tools and I don't want to clip. If I'm working to tape, I obviously don't want to clip the tape machine because there's a chance of like crosstalk or bleed onto other channels. So I just brought that back. I'm going to bring it back down. So see, we're here on Logic. We're clipping at the moment. Drive down a little bit and the volume. Let's bring this. Back off that, so that's the right tom. That's an overall balance of the two. And what I've actually done is the other thing so we've been looking at the low end quite a bit. So the floor tom I'm using like 100, somewhere just over 110. The other bit I'm using quite a lot of the high shelf, which actually gives me the stick attack. I've gone a bit extreme on both of those. So there's basically almost like I've just gone both ends for the low and the high, and that's actually kind of giving you overall balance. So there's no compression at the moment. So let's hear what that sounds like with the kick and the snare. Cool. So just have a listen again now. So looking at the EQ now on the drums, probably have like a low shelf. Look at what I was looking at then. So I've started looking at the EQ on the drums. I tend to have for the kick drum there'll be like a bit of low end around about 60 to 80 hertz. I'll boost that. Sometimes I'll shelf it and high pass, and then I'll probably add somewhere between 6 and 8k just for the clickiness on the drums. With the as I was checking the phase relationship of the drums as well, what I noticed is I've got the EQ of this track. So I've got this is the kick in. Sounds good on its own. Take the E-gain off. When I brought the sub kick in now, because I've EQ'd the low end and the high end, what's happened is that it's actually altered the phase relationship between the two mics. So we've got the two mics now. Is when I bring the sub kick in, you'll notice that the low end actually kind of loses itself or drops back out. So off, low end. If I bring the phase inversion, which is the gain plugin, back in now, don't even know if I want that mic. Let's leave that out for now. Let's bring an EQ on. So the other thing that I've actually done with the kick drum is on the sub kick now I've included a high pass and low pass filter. So the low pass is basically just letting anything below 510 hertz is being allowed through, and it's basically just cutting off from 500 hertz upwards, so just not letting out any of that. And I've also added a high pass, which is the opposite, and it lets anything above 58 hertz. I've added a steep Q bell on this, so what this means is that I've actually kind of used it to actually clip to sort of peak around about 58-60 hertz. It's just to let just kind of use that kind of fundamental sound of the kick to kind of come through and add the energy. And the same thing happens again is with the phase relationship, because I've now started boosting a similar position. So if I got 50, if I go to 62, that's the same position as the other one. I actually need to get rid of the phase inversion. What you're doing when you're actually increasing or decreasing phase is you're actually splitting the phase of that frequency, of the frequency up and down. I'll get an image and I'll include it to actually show you why this happens. So now with the EQ on, you notice with the phase inversion on the sub kick actually gets rid of the low end energy. That's why I like having a phase inversion on the track, so it lets me kind of just check it as I'm going through. Hey, you got this far. If you have any questions about anything that I covered in this video, please leave me a comment in the section below. As I said, this is the first of probably about 4 videos. I'm still editing them. I think I've got the second section I've got to work out. I think I'll add a couple of bits and pieces in that because I think I stopped talking for a while. But I'm going to try and get this out in the next week or so. If you have any questions, comments, let me know. If there's anything you'd like me to see or cover, I do have a form. There's a link to it in the description. Please fill it out and I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. Otherwise, please like, subscribe, and hopefully see you all again next time in the next video. Ta-da!